Good morning, everybody. Hope that music got you all energized and ready to start the day. I see everybody was enjoying it in the background. Perfect. Well, let us get started with today's webinar. It's so great to see some familiar faces and some new ones, and so many proposal people in the same place, and not just because the deadline just moved forward by 2 weeks. Let's start with a simple observation that got us thinking about this webinar. In our profession, hundreds of people complete APMP Foundation every year, and that's a great thing. It means more professionals understand that best practice frameworks, the business development lifecycle, and what good practice is supposed to be like. We're also seeing more organizations request this as a prerequisite for a proposal job. That means, from an APMP perspective, we're building the necessary awareness for our profession. But the interesting part is the moment a bid becomes complex, the framework really gives you a neat answer. Stakeholders disagree, the strategy shifts, and expectations reach, well, miracle stage, right? And suddenly the question isn't, do you know the framework? The question becomes, can you apply it when things get messy? I've always said the magic of the APMP best practice is really around how you apply it in your organization. And that gap between the knowing and understanding the framework and the best practices and actually applying it in the real world is exactly where APMP Practitioner sits. And that's where the conversation we're going to have today. So before we go any further, for those who don't know me, I'm Larissa Cornelius. I'm the CEO of nFold. And as you know, we're a strategic proposal and pitch consultancy company and the only APMP authorized training organization in Africa. Now, I've worked with complex bids for over 20 years, and I've seen firsthand where organizations build real capability and where they don't. I'm joined by two fantastic professionals who've already taken their APMP practitioner journey, and that's what today is about, is to get the real world experience. Kolofelo Magna is an experienced proposal management professional, and she comes with over a decade of experience assembling and managing complex and high-value deals. Welcome, Kolo. And Wendy van Eysen is an experienced bid professional with over 20 years in proposal management, tender strategy, and service delivery. And she has led and supported multi-million rand tenders across both the public and private sectors. Welcome, Wendy. And the good news for all of us is that they survived the APMP practitioner process and they're here to tell their story. By the way, we'll also throw in a few polls during the conversation to get some engagement going. And of course, we'll leave some time for questions towards the end. But let's kick off with some questions. So people don't usually wake up in the morning and think, today feels like a great day to pursue APMP practitioner. Something usually triggers that decision. A particular bid, maybe a new level of responsibility, or sometimes the realization that understanding the framework isn't enough. So I'm curious, Kolo, what made you decide to pursue practitioner?
Thank you, Larissa. So I pursued practitioner to strengthen my strategic approach to proposal management and also to just formally validate my experience. So I'm currently in the legal industry, which is highly competitive, high pressure, and also complex. So to get things done, it's not only about the process, it requires clear positioning and strategy. I also just wanted to go beyond simply knowing best practice and to be able to actually consistently apply them, in addition to obviously using client-focused strategies, particularly in the very complex and high-pressure industry that I'm in. Yeah.
Thanks, Kolo, for sharing that. And Wendy, why did you decide to pursue practitioner?
So, Larissa, Thanks. Practitioner wasn't a decision that I suddenly made. I, given it a lot of thought, I needed to move out of my comfort zone. I found I was challenging bids. I had a lot of questions. And for me, practitioner was one way of advancing and empowering myself to challenge stakeholders, shaping winning strategies. And yeah, so that's basically the reason I did it.
Okay. So, I mean, if I understand, Kolo and Wendy, your perspective was very much a personal choice. You were ready to take the next step of your development forward. And, in terms of the types of work that you were doing, you wanted to be able to get more in-depth knowledge and understanding of this wonderful thing called best practice to take it to the next level of your own career. And I think that's quite interesting because, and we'll talk a little bit later about the statistics of APMP, but we've definitely seen a big trend since last year of a bigger uptake into APMP practitioner from foundation that we have in the past. And we've also started to see a lot of people do foundation, but because they've got already a lot of experience, jump straight to practitioner. So there's been an increase of that as well. So out of curiosity, how long after foundation did you decide to pursue practitioner? And what was happening in your role at the time? Kolo.
I'll go first. Yeah. So I'm one of those that took quite long to actually do my practitioner. I completed my foundation in 2014 and I only did my practitioner in 2024. So I believe during that period, I basically worked for organizations that were not quite familiar with APMP. And not only that, they did not fully recognize or even invest in the value of the accreditation. I would think not only, investing in monetary sense, but also they were not willing to give a person some time to actually study, even if they were doing it on their personal capacity. So I ultimately did my practitioner when I joined Baker McKenzie, which I believe it's a firm that truly understands, the strategic value of bid professionals, and they actively support continuous upskilling, particularly in their industry, given that it's very, conservative. So I really applaud them for that. So when pursuing the practitioner, I was already leading more complex and high-stake pursuits. So the experience really just upskilled and validated what I was already doing. So yeah, that's my take and what it took for me to actually do practitioner. Thanks.
Fantastic. Wendy, what's your perspective?
So, as I said, I didn't rush from foundation to practitioner, which I think helped me in the long run. But I found myself asking questions. I wanted to be more empowered with strategic thinking, like the win themes, the positioning, and of course, I was doing it for me too. So my takeaways from the whole experience was that if you're starting to question bids instead of running them, that's when you're ready for practitioner, and that's where I was at. So yeah.
Brilliant. So I'm hearing two things. One was, a professional choice to wait to feel ready to take the next step in the career journey. And the other I'm hearing is really a restriction in terms of organizations being able and willing to help to pave the way or to pay the cost in order to do the certification, to get the support from organizations in order to do it. I guess everyone's here to kind of hear a little bit more about the experience and really talk about the expectation versus the reality. So if we're honest, a lot of people, when they first look at practitioner, can feel a little bit intimidating. So maybe let's start with you this time, Wendy. Before you started, what did you think it was going to be like, and how did the reality compare? So share your experience.
So I was feeling quite intimidated. People had said to me, it's so difficult, and which I'm not lying, it is difficult. But I needed to challenge myself and find that self-confidence in myself, knowing that I could do it. So that was a big push for me. I was also expecting practitioner to be very academic, which it's not. It's very practical, and it's about applying best practices to real situations. So yeah, it's not about memorizing either. The whole practitioner course, it's not about memorizing it. It's about thinking. So yeah.
Brilliant. And Kolo, your view?
I think I share the same sentiments with Wendy. So I did feel very intimidated. I expected it to be really theoretical and heavy, but in reality, it was just really practical and grounding. And as Wendy says, it challenges your critical thinking rather than testing memorization, which is why it's really important to understand the concepts while you are studying, not just, memorize concept. What really surprised me the most, it's how the application was immediate. I could see the impact, right away in my life beats on how I structured conversations and strategically managed, the chaos within beats. So while it felt really intimidating at first, the reality is that it was incredibly grounding, and it is a confident building experience. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I believe
love
that. Yeah.
I really love that. I love that you've both talked about it's increased your confidence. And I think foundation really sets that great baseline for you. And then practitioners almost, I feel, and this is from my experience from facilitating it, a lot more like a leadership program that you go on. It's now saying, okay, now we've got that foundation. How do we really apply it? How do we oppose critical thinking? How do we start thinking as bid professional leaders? And I really do feel it's more of a leadership program. I think that's why it is hard. It does require that critical thinking, although that's quite fun and challenging in its own way. So yeah, I think that's great input. And I think anything that can make you feel more confident. And again, I think a lot of the power comes in for organizations when you can apply the best practice, because that's where the magic happens. That's where the real win rates start to come in. And I think that's really the sort of the magic about it. And if your professionals are now confident in the ability to apply it, I think that's where the thinking shift comes in. And it is really about that personal transformation. But a lot of questions I get when we're trying to sell APMP to organizations is they want to actually know what has actually changed after the training. So once you completed practitioner, what actually changed in how you approach bids? Not the theory, but the way you think when you're inside any bid situation, or a messy bid situation, or a complex bid situation. Maybe let's start with you, Wendy.
Yeah. So confidence is a big thing. It really does give you confidence to challenge stakeholders, but diplomatically. You're not going in gung-ho type of, you're confident challenging those stakeholders. The biggest shift was how I approached the strategy. So before, with practitioner, I was ensuring that the process was running well. Afterwards, I was asking different questions. I was asking, why are we pursuing this opportunity? How we positioned against our competitors. So it really opens up your thinking. So you shift from thinking from process to the management and strategic thinking. So yeah, and again, confidence. It gives you a lot of confidence.
Brilliant. And have you seen any change in results through that, in your approach, through that change of thinking?
Yes. So definitely, stakeholders were starting to turn to me for direction and just your confidence in yourself. like speaks volumes, you know. So yes, I recently worked on a tender that was quite challenging, and I was working with people I wasn't really familiar with. It definitely was a very good grounding for me, and yeah, it was successful, you know.
Awesome. And Kolo, your perspective?
I think as Wendy has already also mentioned, the way you think changes quite a lot. I mean, I changed my way of thinking into a more strategic way instead of just focusing on tasks and timelines. After practitioner, I always step back and think about positioning, the messaging, and how the bid will actually be evaluated. So it changed me a lot in terms of how I operate strategically under pressure. So yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, I think that's a really important point. I think because the best practice framework doesn't change, it does get updates, like we've seen in Foundation version 4, because it needs to stay with what's happening as far as industry trends are concerned. But I think what does change is how you apply it into the bid environments and in the different environments that you're both in. So that's really, and I also think that when you have more confidence in yourself, you also see, or this has at least been my experience, is that people also treat you differently. They
Yeah.
because you've got that logic to back you around. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Um, Okay, so let's look at a real bid example. So again, it's about how do we take the practitioner knowledge, the training, and put it into a practical application. So, Kolo, let's start with you. Can you think of a real bid situation where the way you approached it was different because of practitioner? Maybe one of those messy bids where everything's happening at once.
Yeah, so in my case, there was one bit that actually stands out. So the submission included presentation preparation immediately after submitting. There was a bit of resistance in terms of the partners, or should I say stakeholders, in terms of involvement. So they also didn't really want to do the proper dry run where you actually get them into a room or on a call and then they run through the process of who's going to be speaking first and who will be taking these questions, timing the actual presentation as well. So with my practitioner knowledge, I knew that I had to find a way to actually get them to cooperate. So I had to reframe dry runs as, risk management, and also just let them know that we are going to be able to highlight where the messaging doesn't land and, if the timing is a bit off or if we overlap. So it also helped me in a way that you persuade, the stakeholders or the partners in a strategic manner. So I would say that, practitioner also shifted my mindset into not only deferring, to senior people, but to confidently, protect the outcome. Not only, just allow or accept that, the partners or the stakeholders are not willing to do the actual dry run and just let it go and just focus on, building slides, but be able to protect the outcome and push, where possible. So with that result, the presentation actually went well and the client was happy and they had what they needed to hear. So that's my live bid experience. Yeah.
Thank you, Kolo.
Mhm.
Wendy.
Yeah, so I recently worked on a bid that was quite messy. And before practitioner, I would have tried to bring order to the chaos or get the plan right, keeping everyone aligned to the agenda. But after practitioner, you start to ask yourself, does everybody understand the client's drivers? Um, are we competitive or are we just compliant? And where do we differentiate? So this led us to reshape the win themes, the solution, which felt risky because it was quite close to crunch time for us, but it made the proposal more focused and more compelling. So yeah, it helped me in that tender, definitely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It's great to hear that you were able to apply what you learned effectively to the bids. And I think, again, like I said, I know that's where the magic happens ultimately. But yeah, I think it's interesting that, you know, you had slightly different approaches to when you had foundation versus when you've got the confidence of how to apply the best practice, because I really think foundation gives you that knowledge. Sorry, I'm getting some background noise.
Yeah, it's background noise. We can't hear it properly, please.
Yes, thank you, Wayne. So I'm not sure where the background noise is coming from. It seems to have settled now. So, yeah, I think that's where the magic happens, is when you apply that best practice. There's sort of a dog barking in the background. I'm not sure if that's in anyone's background there. Maybe if we can just check if everyone is muted except for Wendy and Kolo. Okay. So yeah, I think that's such a core point that you mentioned, Kolo, is that, you know, it's really about the ability to how you can credibly influence and create professional impact. And I really like the aspect that you brought around, you know, selling dry runs as, you know, risk management. And that's such a key part of what we do. And I think another point that I think we need to consider is that it's also not just about the proposals, but what we are seeing is an increase of proposals that need to become pitches. Because with the increase of AI coming into the industry, we're finding that a lot of procurement teams are going, oh, we don't know if we can trust these organizations haven't just used an AI to write the proposal. And therefore, there are more pitches and presentations that happen after the case. And I think that's the important part, is the best practice does include not only how you position yourself in your proposals and your tenders, it covers your presentations and pitches, but also how you're presenting yourself and positioning yourself through the entire business development lifecycle. And that's really what this is testing. That's why we've got practitioner and capture practitioner. Capture practitioner being the, you know, is looking at it and testing it from a sales perspective, a business development professional perspective, whereas practitioner is testing it from a proposal bid professional perspective. So I think that's interesting. So let's stick on to credibility and influence. Did you notice, Kolo, any shift in how people in your organization listened or involved you in bids? Was there a difference after you completed practitioner?
Yes, I definitely noticed a shift, not only on getting involved earlier in pitches or bids, but I think with the quality of the bids as well. I mean, I'm always getting, you know, compliments on saying that my first drafts are actually consistently, you know, polished, client focused, and they look like the final product. So that builds, you know, a lot of credibility and rapport with, you know, the stakeholders. And as a result, you know, reviews are more focused, decisions are faster, and the overall bid process becomes quicker and efficient. So yeah.
Amazing. I love that. So, and I mean, I think that's the distinction, is the value isn't just in the certification itself. I think that's a nice personal nod to yourself. But I think the value is the level of thinking that we bring into the bid process, that we bring into the business development process when we bring it across. So let's widen the lens slightly and let's look at it. We've been talking a lot around your individual experience with practitioner, why you went into it, how it's impacted you. But let's widen the lens from your organization's perspective. What value did practitioner actually create? So, Kolo, let's start with you. You said, you know, you were waiting for an organization. Your organization understood and invested in your professional development. So what value did the organization get out of taking you through this journey?
Sure. I think we may look at it as a sense of having a strategic capability rather than administrative support function. So there's a lot of confidence and buy-in in terms of the stakeholders getting more with our best practice knowledge. So they are confident in allowing or accepting our recommendations because they know that, you know, there is knowledge behind that. It's not just somebody that's putting together a slide deck or a pitch or a capability statement. So we no longer seen as people that just put those things together, but we are qualified bid professionals with strong understanding of strategy, risk, and positioning. So this has really resulted in greater trust, like I had mentioned, and there's also like more meaningful conversations with stakeholders throughout the entire bid lifecycle. So yeah, confidence in our recommendations, the knowledge that we are actually qualified to do the job, and knowing that we are strategic people, we're not just administrative support. So those are the key, you know, values for the practitioner in terms of my firm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, and I think we see it quite a lot in like the legal, the engineering, you know, in even in the health sector, we see that they, you know, in those sectors, you know, a lot of the professionals you're dealing with are already certified, right? They're lawyers in your case. And I feel that they tend to, you know, they understand professional associations. They understand the idea of continuous education units, which for those on the call, if you get your foundation level or you get your practitioner level, you've got to maintain your best practice to maintain your certification. So I think that one gets you taken more seriously. Any other experience from your side on, you know, since you've done practitioner, on the organizational value? Obviously, coming from an nFold perspective, we're working across multiple clients.
Exactly. But I agree with what Kolo says. People see you differently because you've changed your mindset. You're asking different questions. You're providing more meaningful input. So people are now more, they take you more seriously. So definitely also you're qualifying opportunities more effectively, and you're building stronger win strategies. You improve how teams work together as well. So yeah, higher bid quality is a better win. So that definitely is a payoff on that investment.
Amazing. Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. And, you know, I think one of the things, I mean, and, you know, and Wendy, I didn't ask you this, so, you know, it's something to think about. But, you know, often it's also, I think it's the win rates. The interesting statistics that we see is just by people being APMP members, we see that they win 3% more than non-members in the statistics. Now, what I'm really curious to see is, you know, how much more are foundation level people winning versus how much more are your practitioner winning versus foundation. And I think that those would be very, very interesting statistics. So, of course, we've just revealed the numbers on the screen. But what you can see in these numbers is something that's very interesting, is that, as you can see, that foundation is pretty solid. There's a big uptake on foundation. In fact, there's more foundation certifications than there are APMP members globally. So foundation has been very well institutionalized, partly because I believe organizations ask for this as a baseline prerequisite for jobs. But we don't see as much uptake being taken to the next level of practitioner, which is interesting. Although there's been a very big jump from last year when we were doing practitioner last year with a cohort, it was only about 2%, which now it's about 12% of people are taking up practitioner. So I think this is a very interesting statistic to really look at. And I think this is important. I think even though there is a clear drop-off, I don't believe it's a drop-off problem of people go, okay, foundation is enough. It might actually be a reflection of how a profession works and what organizations accept as a recruitment as a baseline. So the way I like to think of it is the foundation is the entry ticket. Practitioner is really where professionals separate themselves. So, Kolo, what is your view? Why do you think so many professionals stop there?
Caller, you're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So in my view and in my experience, I would think that it also comes down to the organizations not willing to invest in the accreditation and not seeing the value. So my plea to everybody and the organization would be that a practitioner is a great deal of a value for organizations. You see the change in the thinking. You actually see the value in the win and also the questions that your people or your bid professionals would be asking in terms of positioning your submissions and your bids. So please do give your bid professionals the chance to upskill and get practitioners. So yeah, that's it from my side. Yeah.
Hello, Wendy, in your view?
Yeah, so I think once you've achieved foundation, it gives you a sense of achievement. So, and practitioner also is quite a daunting, people have told you how daunting it is. And I agree with Kolo. Companies, I don't want to say they don't want to invest, but they're reluctant to you know, send you for further training. But it's an industry that's growing, and practitioner is definitely in demand. So companies need to change that thinking. They need to shift that thinking, and yeah, and also perhaps people don't see the difference, but there definitely is a difference. You just work better in complex bid situations. Yeah. So that's my thinking.
I think it's interesting thinking. I think before, what I'd like to do is just go back to your experience, because both of you experienced different formats of how we trained the practitioner training. So let's look at you first, Kolo. Kolo, you did it the way when we ran it with you, it was a lot closer to how a lot of the global authorized training organizations run it, which is really, although we did it over 2 days, it was more of a leadership program and exam preparation, and then you were kind of left to go and do your own self-study. It wasn't yet a 4-month learning program that we built it into. So just share a little bit of your experience there, because again, people need to know there's different ways to prepare to learn for practitioner.
So in my case, it was more of self-study, like you had mentioned, Larissa, but the 2 days really, really helped a lot, which I believe is why the process now includes more of a formal, longer training. So the 2 days really helped a lot. Pardon, I think I had some background noise. Is there a question?
No, I think you're good.
Okay. All right, cool. So like I had mentioned, the 2 days really, really helped a lot. And in my case, it was more of a self-study and getting my colleagues that are also doing the same thing, even if we were not in the same company, just connecting and asking each other questions and having our little sessions. So that, I think, in a sense, proved the need for longer periods of training. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kolo. And then Wendy, maybe share your experience, because you tried the newer version that we launched last year. And this was purely because we found that what happened is a lot of people did the prep session and then they waited 12 months to write the exam, which is quite late. And that's where they sort of struggled, because they didn't stay abreast with it, where now we've changed that format. So maybe, Wendy, you can share that format a little bit and how you think that differed versus what you heard Kolo's experience was.
Yeah. So the format that I attended was that 4-month format. We had weekly group sessions, and my advice to anyone is to commit yourself 100% to the whole process. It definitely paid off for me. So you learn from others, you learn from Larissa. She's got a lot to teach and share with everybody. And yeah, just, commit yourself to the whole course. It's a hell of an opportunity that's given to people, and take advantage of that and learn as much as you can. And as I say, that hard work pays off.
And I
Yeah.
think it's important to understand it's not a full 4 months. Sorry, Kolo.
No,
Yes, I
no,
wanted
it's not a
to,
full 4 month.
sorry.
No,
Yeah. So I wanted
it's
to
a,
just add
yeah.
or agree with Wendy on committing yourself, because I also remember with the process that I went through, we were, I think, more than 4 or 5, I think we were 5 people that were supposed to do practitioner, but only the 2 of us ended up taking the actual test. So it needs
Yes.
commitment and just, pushing to get it done. Yeah.
Yes, so just to what Larissa said, it wasn't a 4 month course, it was spread over 4 months, which, we went through module by module on a weekly basis, did our practice exams, and definitely I found it beneficial.
So we just support or facilitate that
Correct.
self-learning experience, Kolo. And also I think what I did like is that the cohort really built leadership skills, great relationships together, and they sort of supported and peer pressured each other, Kolo. So we ended up with a much bigger number writing the exam at the end,
Yeah.
which I think is important
Yeah.
ultimately. No, brilliant. Thanks for sharing your experience. I think, overall, I think we're hearing that foundation gives you the language, but practitioners where it's tested and you actually apply it into the life deals. And I think that's a different type of pressure and it's a different type of level, because now your thinking directly impacts revenue, scoring, and outcomes. And as you guys mentioned, you're more confident, you're being listened to differently because you're showing up differently in your organization. So even though right now many organizations see foundation as the baseline, which I suspect is where that drop happens, although we are seeing a big increase from last year starting to bring into practitioner, I almost say that the real value shows up when teams can consistently apply best practice, not just understand it. So I think the real question isn't why don't people continue? I think it's when does your role or your organization need more than just understanding and start requiring better impact? Because understanding winning best practice is useful, but applying them is what actually helps you win more. So let's sort of ask the sort of last question to the panel. If someone's listening today is considering practitioner, but hasn't taken that step yet, what would you say to them? And why do they need to be honest with themselves before making that decision? Let's start with you, Wendy.
Okay, so I think you need to be honest with yourself as to where you are in your career. If you find you're still learning the basics, I think you're not ready to move on to practitioner. Foundation is going to pay off for you. But if you're finding yourself making judgment calls, stakeholders are turning to you for advice and for direction, it's time for practitioner.
Excellent. Thanks, Wendy. Kolo?
I would say that it's definitely worth it, but you need to be really honest about why you're actually doing it. You need to be ready to also go beyond just doing your task and execution, and be ready to ask harder questions about strategy, value, and making decisions under pressure. So it's not only about adding a badge to your name of knowing enough. It challenges you to think, to influence, more stakeholders, and make you comfortable in judging calls during messy situations. So the real question that you should be asking yourself is, am I ready to step into a more strategic and influential direction? And so it is definitely worth it, but you need to genuinely ask yourself those questions before going for it. Yeah.
Thanks, Kolo. I've really enjoyed about this conversation, or what I enjoy about these conversations is that we get, your perspectives of what you've experienced, and that gives you an honest perception, and no one said that practitioner suddenly turns you into a superhero proposal or sales manager or capture manager. But what it does do is sharpen how you think, and that thinking is usually the difference between a bid that is just submitted and one that is actually competitive. I think foundation already helps you to contribute to your proposal efforts and your sales efforts more effectively, but practitioner really means that you're taking accountability for winning them. And I think that's the real difference. So if you're wondering what the next stage of your development might look like, today I hopefully I gave you a clearer picture of what practitioner really represents. And look, let's open up the floor to ask any questions. We still have some time today, so any questions that anyone has, this is the time.
Laura, Kian has a question. He's keen to know about the 4-month program.
Okay, Kian, great. So in terms of the 4-month program, what we've done is like we said, we saw there was a big difference in terms of people coming to do the training and then writing the exam, or they would leave it really late because you have to really go through the entire body of knowledge. So what we've done is to make it a lot easier is we've built it into a program where you work with a cohort. We start the cohort with a 2-day live session, which I like to think of as a leadership session. It's a little close to what we did with Kolofelo in an original thing, which is kind of setting the baseline of what practitioner is, how does the exam work, set the expectations of what you need to expect, and then also cover some of the key aspects that set the foundational aspects for practitioner. And then what we did there is that we would then we broke up the sections and we gave you sort of broken up modules, let's put it that way, to say, okay, you know what, every week, this is how much you need to read or you need to go through. And we would touch base every week. So everyone would kind of do their work. Think of it like a book club, although we have this year, we're bringing it into a learning management system. So it's a little bit more integrated, a little bit more interactive. So it's a lot easier to work through. But then we have live QA sessions to make sure, has everyone stayed abreast in terms of where they are? Are there any questions? Do we understand how to apply it? And then, of course, lots and lots of practice exams and testing, I think, is really, really important. So it was a little bit, it's probably about a 4-hour effort commitment that you are looking at on a weekly basis that you need to be applying over this 4-month period, a little bit longer when you do the 2-day session. And then we ended up with the last day session where people could choose to either write online or live, and that we would come live and write together at the same date, so that we're also not pushing up that exam date. So within those 4 months, we know we're going to write, and that's how we do the program. Does that answer your question, Kian? Is there anything else that you wanted?
No, I thank you for the response. That was amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, I think a lot of the stuff is really, I mean, again, some people choose to go through it on their own through APMP, and you can go and learn the body of knowledge. But I think the value of having the group learning creates this leadership cohort. You're also getting experience of how it's actually applied, because remember, we don't just train, we actually apply this best practice every day in customer environments, which I think is important. And it's also about, making sure the interpretation of the best practice is applied effectively, because we also sometimes fall into bad habits in our organizations if we're not applying all the best practices. So it's really about immersing yourself in the APMP best practice world for those 4 months. I think is a very powerful process. It is a commitment, but I think it just helps, and we've definitely seen a bigger turnaround time and a higher pass rate through that. Sibo, I saw your hand was up.
Hi everyone. I just wanted to know, how much is the course?
I'm trying to remember.
I will let you know, Spongile.
Ilse will let you know, but it's around 23,000, 24,000, yes, somewhere around there to do the 4-month course. So again, it is an investment, but I don't believe it's much more expensive than what people are paying for foundation. But again, you're getting that 4 months on, that 4 months training, you're getting that regular input in terms of the information, and that's giving you a real comfort in terms of making sure that you really are utilizing the body of knowledge which you already have access to as APMP members. And it's now about really immersing yourself in that best practice. And like Wendy and Kolo said, it's not about parrot fashioning it, right? Because that's not where value comes from. It's, okay, can I now apply that thinking to a scenario-based exam? Because that's what it is. It's a scenario-based exam where you're given a mock-up situation of who you are, who the competitors are, here's the bid opportunity and the customer's opportunity, and you've got to answer questions applying that best practice. And so it's no more just about understanding it and the basics. It's really about now understanding, can I apply that best practice? And I think that is really very powerful. I think for those of you who've already done foundation, or those of you thinking of doing foundation, you'll already see a lot of people go, wow, aha, there's lots of these light bulb moments, as I like to call them, where a lot of things start to make sense. It's already starting to train your thinking a little differently. But I think that practitioner just takes it that one level forward. And I quite enjoy the exam questions. It's a little bit like puzzle solving. It's like it is really, you've got to really think quite critically. And I think that's important to teach our brains to do that, because let's be honest, there's nothing simple about winning business. There's nothing simple about winning business and being involved in the proposal and tender process. It's a very agile, dynamic, and interesting place to be in. And it is getting more strategic. And that's really what this course is about. Someone said they completed their CP last week. Fantastic, congratulations. But you're always keen for more training and understanding our peers' work. Brilliant, well done, Kian. Absolutely. And maybe something you want to consider is looking at some of the micro certifications as a nice sort of deep dive or add-on. And of course, there's these kinds of webinars and sessions that we hold regularly in the winning, serious about winning webinars that we're running. So again, we always welcome you as the audience to suggest talks that you would like us to have. This is really about learning from each other. And I think that's also the value of being part of the APMP community, is that it's a professional association to uplift the standards of how we win work and promote awareness for what we do in a profession, because we do create jobs, we retain jobs, we are revenue generation functions within our businesses. And I think it's it's a very important role that we do play. And it's through these kinds of interactions and APMP sessions that we can participate, we can stay abreast of what's happening. We still have a few minutes, Kian. I mean, you said you just got your practitioner certification, so maybe you can share with us what your experience was and what process you went through.
Thanks, Larissa. Look, it's quite interesting to sit on this forum and hear you guys mention this 4-month training program, which I think is really, really great. I didn't have that, unfortunately. When I did my foundation training, I attended I think it was a 1-day workshop where we just walked through what the exam looks like. And that was it. And was like, okay, off you go, So a lot of the studying and practicing for this exam is actually the skills that I've developed, throughout my career, and then of course working with the body of knowledge and various training materials. So pretty much self-taught. But I think it's really, really fascinating, to hear about this, because I think within the industry, and again within Australia and probably other places as well, that there isn't much exposure into actual training for taking the examination. And I think, this is, we talk about competitive advantage and so on. I mean, I think, you got it at nFold, and that's really, really awesome. And I'm definitely keen to try that. So when I got into this exam last week, I was thinking to myself, I delayed this for like 3 years, right? And I'm
Yeah.
thinking to myself, am I gonna pass this? Am I gonna, because honestly, like no amount of preparation made me feel prepared because I was literally going it self-paced, right? But then
Yes.
I got in there, passed the exam, and thought to myself, well, that wasn't too bad, But again, it was that fear of stepping into something that I didn't feel properly prepared for. And I'm not sure if that's something we can relate to, or other people can relate to. But I think it's that perhaps that prevents a lot of people from taking that step because, like I said,
Absolutely.
there's not enough training out there that focuses on it. Sorry, thank you.
No, thanks, Kieran. We really appreciate your experience. And like I said, there is always the ability that people can do this directly through APMP. They can do self-study. They can go through preparation courses. But we just felt there was a gap, and particularly, particularly a lot in our region. If you look at the sort of global statistics, that in Africa we tend to be more multi-skilled because we're expected to do more with less in terms of roles. And I think also that's been a challenge in uptake in certainly in Africa. I don't know if it's the same in Australia, but because people are so busy, because they are being proposal managers and risk managers and bid writers, and they're having to play different hats. And I'm sure that is the same globally as well. That we felt it was important to do this, and we certainly saw the demand to have more training. And so it's, I think, a little less lonely and a little bit easier to do it in a group and facilitated. So that's great feedback to hear that that is important. We've done that with our master classes as well, as we've paid them now for the micro certifications. We've paid them with master classes. So it's not just about the exam prep, but I think what's important is how do you actually take what you've learned and actually apply that. And that I think is critically important. I also saw someone on the line was looking to take foundation. So absolutely, it's a very difficult jump to go. You have to start at foundation to go to practitioner. It really does set that foundational knowledge for you. And it already starts you thinking differently. And we've also, we were having this discussion yesterday, Wendy and Kolo and I, was that we've seen an uptake of where people are doing foundation and then they go straight to practitioner. And that's perfectly acceptable, provided that you have got at least 3.5 years experience. But if you go to foundation and everything sounds new and daunting, you probably want to go and apply that for a little while to make sure you actually understand how to apply the information before you do practitioner. But we also find people who've been in the game for, like Wendy, you've been in the game for 20 years and, you did foundation, you were already about 15 years into the game when you did foundation. So you already have the experience. But again, even for you, you wanted to take a little longer to get to that next step, which is a personal choice. But people who are in that game and they go, okay, actually, you know what, I get this. This makes sense. I can see how it's applied or how we maybe could do it better in our organizations. And then those people are perfectly ready to write straight away. So it really depends on everybody's journey of where they are ready to learn. We've also converted our foundation into a month program. So it's also very much a supported learning journey along the line as well for those thinking of foundation. Precious asked if there's a minimum years you need to have after obtaining foundation in order to do practitioner. Yes, practitioner requires that you have at least 3.5 years experience in the bid and proposal game. And we do request references to confirm that you've been in the game, whether it's in the business development lifecycle or in the proposal bid management lifecycle. You need to have at least that minimum years experience, where foundation recommends at least a year. And as long as you've met that prerequisite, then you're fine to go into practitioner. Brilliant. Anything else? Exciting. Thanks, guys. I hope we gave you a lot of food for thought. please feel free to get in touch with us. And again, recommend any topics that you want us to talk to at these sessions. I know one of the popular ones seemed to be quite popular was talking about how do we, as bid professionals, set boundaries for ourselves. If that's something you're keen on listening to, hearing about, let us know, and we can think about putting a webinar together around that. We appreciate the participation, and Kian, thanks so much for sharing your experience. It's wonderful to hear the different experiences that everyone has around the world.
Thank you. Thank you for a
Thank
great
you, Wendy.
presentation.
Thank you, Kolo. Have a great day, everybody.